I'm Stuart Beard.
And I'm John Hassel, and you're listening to the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast.
John, it's good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, I am fine. It's very good to have you back here in the studio recording these podcasts in person once again.
Yeah, it certainly is. And what a good topic we've got today. We're going to be talking about the M77.
Yeah, and can't you believe when I check back in our records, we've never actually discussed the M77.
Not just, as one topic now.
Yeah.
We've done bits of it. We've
Yep.
spoken about the history,
Yep.
and so on. But no, we're actually going to talk about the road as it is today and how it came about.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting topic. As I say, not one we've discussed in much detail before, so I'm sure people will appreciate it. We'll be discussing the section from the original section up at Dumbreck Road, all the way down through the 1990s extension, through the extension down to Fenwick that was finished in 2005, and giving you a whole load of facts and figures and details
Information.
and info all about that.
We do have some unrelated questions that come in at the end of this, so we're hoping to get to answer them if we have time.
Yes, it's been a while since we answered any listener questions, so yep, I'm looking forward to what you've got for me. I haven't pre-prepared, so I hope I can answer them.
Good.
Yep.
It's candid. I like it.
While we're at it, I should say I hope everyone enjoyed last month's podcast, our interview with Chris. I seemed to go down very well.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought it was very good to get someone else's perspective on the system.
Yeah.
But someone who has a perspective similar to ours, but in another part of the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
I think it turned out very well, and I can't wait for us to be able to meet up in person and maybe do a follow-up. I think that would be really good.
Is there any... I'm going to put something to the listeners right now about guests. If you have an idea of somebody who you'd like us to interview or could be a great guest on the podcast, then please get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to hear your suggestions. You guys are listening to this. If there's things that we aren't covering you want to hear about, let us know.
Let us know.
Okay, on that note then,
We should get fired right into it.
yes, so the M77.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'm going to tell you a bit about the M77 for people who maybe don't know a lot about it.
Okay.
So that is basically what was originally known in the highway plan for Glasgow as the Ayr Motorway. Now, we had a podcast on this several months ago on the Ayr Motorway and the history all around that. We're not talking about that this time. We're going to focus, as John said earlier, on the road as it is built.
Yes.
Okay, and as it's built, it connects the M8 at junction 22 at Plantation, all the way down to the A77 at the top end, the northern end of the A77 Kilmarnock bypass.
At the Meiklewood Junction.
Yes, and as we know, that section was constructed in 1973, and there was various parts of history and things that have come since that delayed bits of it happening, and we'll cover a wee bit of that in detail as well.
We did speak just a quick A77 thing here.
Yep.
We did talk a bit about the Kilmarnock bypass
We
on
did.
our Ayrshire Road special, so
Yes.
check that out.
Yeah, definitely. Go back and check that one out because there was a lot of detail in that podcast. That was a really enjoyable one for us to do.
Yeah, it's a good topic.
Yeah. Okay, so M77, as I said, the story began in 1965 as part of the highway plan. Ultimately, only one section of the road that was envisaged within the highway plan went ahead, and that was the Dumbreck Road connection. Now, today, you would find that between the M8 at junction 22 and junction 1 at Dumbreck Road. So that short stub of dual carriageway that was constructed was really a sort of a scaled down version of the Ayr Motorway. Now, construction in that actually began in 1979. The ramps for it over the M8, so at Plantation, ramp A and C as we know them, they were constructed as part of the Renfrew Motorway. So they were actually completed in the autumn of 1976.
But you couldn't use them.
You couldn't use them. They went unused for 5 years. Okay, so that was all done as pre-works because they knew they were looking to extend some kind of road towards Ayrshire that would allow traffic to bypass Newton Mearns and Pollokshaws and all these places in the south side that were heavily trafficked, even in the 60s and 70s, by traffic heading for the south. For Ayrshire, for the southwest. Okay, so that was really the main driving force behind the need for what is now the M77. Okay, so the Dumbreck Road connection comes along. Initially, it was going to be 4 lanes in each direction. They knew there would be a lot of traffic using that, but as money tightened and as public perception started to turn against motorways, particularly urban motorways, they scaled it back to basically what became an all-purpose dual carriageway. That ended on a roundabout at Dumbreck Road.
Yeah.
Now, that section opened in August of 1981, and I believe actually it was the 5th of August, 1981. And it was designed by Scott Wilson Kirkpatrick, just like the Renfrew Motorway. They were continuing their their commission there. And really, you could say that the Dumbreck Road connection was the last of the original motorways in Glasgow to open to traffic.
Yeah.
You know, you think of that spell of construction that started in 1965.
Yeah.
It actually ended in 1981 with the completion of the Dumbreck Road connection.
So something here is just going to clear something up. We're talking about, we are saying this road was kind of like a dual carriageway, but it was a motorway, so to speak. It just wasn't really openly referred to as the M77 at that point because it was so incredibly short. But the only way you could get to it was from the M8, and if you were joining at Dumbreck, you were only going to end up on the M8, so therefore it actually was a motorway. So it did come into effect at that point.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you'll remember that the initial commission that Scott Wilson had when they were revising it, because they had already done an outline design for what was the Ayr motorway, when they were revising it for Dumbreck Road connection, they were told that they were to make it look as though there was no intention to extend the motorway southwards.
Yeah, so just put a flat roundabout. Don't have something which is like flared carriageways and ramps that were going to go somewhere.
But at the same time, they were also told that they were to allow for it to be extended southwards in the future. It was all about the look of it. They didn't want it to be obvious that it was going to continue. So no unused slip roads or spurs or anything like that. It just ended on a flat roundabout, as John says. And from 1981 until 1995, that was basically the situation. We had two lanes in each direction, no hard shoulders.
But am I right in saying that the section just now between Dumbreck and Plantation, although it's dual 2 lanes, yes, there is at the moment there is an auxiliary lane southbound that makes it makes it 3, but it was allowed. It was built in such a way that it could be widened.
Yeah, so they left enough space along that section that hard shoulders or running lanes could be added at a later date. Again, it wasn't made to look like that. It was big, thick grass verge. But there was enough space between the retaining walls and over some of the structures that would allow for this additional lane to be added in. And as you see on the southbound direction, between Plantation and Junction 1, they added that extra running lane in advance of the M74 opening to traffic, because they knew there was going to be an incredible amount of traffic coming off the M74 heading down the M77. Likewise, northbound, they added a hard shoulder as far as the railway bridge coming north. So as part of the extension south from Dumbreck Road, which we'll discuss in a moment, they added hard shoulders to the rest of the route, just to bring it up to motorway standards. I mean, that short length of dual carriageway was motorway. It was under motorway regulations.
Yeah, but it wasn't motorway spec.
That's right.
Is the term we like to differentiate.
That's the kind of crucial thing there. And we know that it was referred to as M77 at that time, but all the signage was like M77/M8 or brackets M8, because you couldn't go anywhere else. If you were heading north.
It was a spur. Yeah.
It was a spur. Yeah, there was no doubt about that. It was a spur, and it helped traffic a bit. But ultimately, you were only ever really going to get the benefits from that if it was extended southwards. And almost immediately after the completion of the Dumbreck Road connection, people were already starting to call on Strathclyde Regional Council to work to extend it southwards.
So what did you do before this, right? So you were put at Dumbreck, and what did you have to do? Take Kilmarnock Road, or you'd have to go and kind of fight your way? Yeah,
basically you turned left. If you came off the roundabout, at Dumbreck Road, you had to turn left, go along Dumbreck Road, head back to Pollokshaws Road, and then drive down the A77 from there. So it really wasn't a shortcut at all. I mean, it was taking you away from some of the busier sections of the A77 to just south of the city centre. Round about like the what's the area where the Shell garage is, and there's
I can visualise what you're talking about, but the actual district
all round about there. What's I was going to say Strathbungle, but it's not. That's much further south, but another area that would have been affected by it. So in those general areas like Govan Hill. Yeah. So all around that area, where the traffic flows were really high. So the Dumbreck Road connection kind of bypassed that section, and that was about it. Okay. Now, contractor information for this section. Actually, I said 5th of August earlier. It's the 7th of August. So
you're out by 2 days. We're going to need to stop and re-record.
I know. I correct myself on that one.
We'll edit it out.
Yeah. Right. And the contractor in this one was our old friend Watling's Construction.
Okay. So again, they're the guys that done a lot in the Inner Ring Road.
They did indeed. Usual contractor. So as I say, it was the last of the kind of main original motorway contracts in Glasgow. Okay. So anyway, as I said, almost as soon as it opened, people started saying, hang on, when are we getting the rest of this? But Strathclyde had already given a commitment at that stage that they weren't going to extend the road any further, hence the design choice to make it look as though it was a permanent, terminus. Even though we know the engineers, on the other hand, had said, allow for a wee bit of movement if need be. So the politicians have said, no more urban motorways. We're not going to go through Pollock Park or anything like that. It's not going to happen. But traffic growth was phenomenal at that time.
We're talking about the 80s
Yeah.
here, you know, when we've seen a huge boom in it.
Yep.
You know, this is when the network started to suffer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in particular, the roads heading south, because people go to Ayrshire for, people going to the coast. People
Prestwick Airport.
movement of goods. Prestwick Airport
Yeah.
became, an important place.
Yep.
There were calls from Ayrshire politicians initially to get the M77 built or get a new road of some kind built, because people would come up from Ayr or Kilmarnock or any of the other districts down there, and they would get to Newton Mearns. Now, coming off the E77, as we'll discuss a bit later, wasn't exactly a great road. However, when you got to Newton Mearns, you were basically chucked onto an urban section of wide single carriageway.
Yeah.
There were some dual carriageway sections as well. And you then crawled for miles, for about 5 miles, from there towards the city centre. Total nightmare, we know congestion was bad. We know the accident rates on those surface streets was also bad. And eventually, the commitment came from Strathclyde Regional Council, working with the Scottish Office, because affordability-wise, the project, couldn't be delivered by them on their own. They said, okay, let's start looking into how we can extend this road south. And they were very vague initially about what form the road would be in. Was it going to be dual carriageway? Was it going to be motorway? And because of the perception of motorways, they didn't mention that too widely.
They were clever with how they named the scheme,
Yeah,
weren't they?
Yeah, they were. So they referred to it as the Ayr Road route.
Yes, because route is nice and vague,
Yeah.
ambiguous.
Yep.
Be anything.
So that didn't immediately, generate any opposition or immediate concerns.
Yeah,
Yes.
you weren't using M77.
Absolutely.
You were saying motorway. Yeah.
Certainly, as things started to become a bit clearer, and it was obvious that the road would have to skirt around the western edge of Pollock Park, people then obviously started to become a bit more concerned. But before all that kicked off, there was a whole load of process, that they went through. So from about 1986, 87, Halford and Associates, who we've spoken about many times before for the architectural input and landscaping design and the like, they were commissioned by Strathclyde to look into how the road could fit in with the landscape the best it could. And we've got a number of photo records and surveys and things, done by them between that period, between 86 and 88, that's taking photos.
So it's at the late 80s. This was really coming about as we're going to need to build something here.
Yeah, exactly. So they were making a bit of progress on that.
Okay.
And there's a number of photos and artist impressions and the like. They even built some models showing what Junction 3 and Junction 2 would look like, some 3D models of that, as well as I said, the artist's impressions, just trying to get a picture in mind. It was immediately clear to Strathclyde that they wanted no more than 2 lanes in each direction. Some of the other junctions that were proposed in the Ayr motorway that had come about as part of the highway plan or the Greater Glasgow Transportation Study, they were shelved completely. So like between Junction 1 and 2, as we know it now, there was going to be another junction about halfway along that would have connected with a road ultimately heading for Paisley.
Paisley Expressway.
Yep, that had all been scrapped before then, so there was no need for that. Likewise, other connections to the Glasgow, the southern road, there was the Motherwell to Paisley motorway, that had all been cancelled by this stage as well, so there was no need to provide additional junctions for that.
Yeah.
So really, it was going to be this bare minimum road. Okay, they knew they were going to have grade-separated junctions.
Because it was going to be a motorway.
Yeah, and eventually I think it was admitted that, this road would be as well to be a motorway because there was adequate provision alongside for non-motorway vehicles.
Yeah.
The E77 or the other routes round about there, provided a good alternative. This was a new road and a new corridor, therefore you could justify motorway.
I can see, yeah. And it's clever how they went about it.
Yeah.
So as we start heading into the 90s and this becomes a reality, what really then, we know the story of what happens to a degree between us here, Stuart, and some people who are listening to this podcast certainly will remember the M77 being constructed and some of the events surrounding that construction phase. So what started to happen in the 1990s where people started to realise, was there a bit of a public backlash initially, or was it only until it went to site?
There was some public backlash initially. Now, we know that the project itself went through public inquiry in the very early 90s, possibly even the late 80s. That's still something we have to firm up on. So if somebody can confirm when the public local inquiry for the M77 Ayr road route was, that would be very helpful. But we know it was round about that time. And we know that past that at that time there might have been some concerns, but there was certainly no direct action, like what came later. The main reason for the road taking so long to get built was funding. There was a lot of disagreement between Strathclyde Regional Council and the Scottish Office about funding levels. Now, with the setup that existed at that time, Strathclyde Regional Council were responsible for all motorways within the old Glasgow city boundary. So at that time, the M8 from Bailston through to Hillington, the M80 Steps bypass, other sections, they were Strathclyde's responsibility. And it really, because they were not trunk roads, it was their responsibility to build them. And I think the original idea that the Scottish Office had was that Strathclyde would build the section from Dumbreck Road down to Junction 3, basically just shy of the city boundary, and the Scottish Office would then pay for the section from then on. But Strathclyde fought back and said, well, no, we don't have enough money to build this. If you want it, you're going to have to, come up with some funding. And there was a lot of discussion about how it would be delivered. And one of the ways that happened was Strathclyde started to let a number of advance contracts. So there were a number of contracts let for earthworks, drainage, embankments, all those sorts of things. Even some amendments to the local road network. We believe even that the bridge over the Whitecap Water was built in advance because it then provided access to the north and south of the site at the river, at the Whitecap Water. All these things happened in the early 90s, so that by the time in 1995, when they finally let the construction contract to Wimpey, and it was a design and build contract, which meant they brought in their own designer, so Strathclyde did some basic design and the rest of the design was done by Bapty. By the time that contract was let, all Wimpey really were doing were building a road on a pre-prepared corridor. So that explains that very short construction period. So construction began in June of 1995, and the road opened in the 6th of December 1996.
Yes, that's correct. That you're saying, a very short construction time.
Yeah.
And that is pretty short considering sections of this are quite urban. There's also a section through which goes around the side of Pollock Park.
Yeah.
Right. So that's quite remarkable in the sense they've managed to do it in that time, considering the events that happened early on within the construction phase.
Yeah.
Which we'll start to talk about.
Yeah. So obviously there were a number of people who were very unhappy at the proposal to build a new motorway, particularly due to the impact of it on Pollock Park.
This was different from an earlier protest, wasn't it? Because they weren't were they demolishing houses?
No.
For this,
there was no real property demolition involved in the Ayr Road route,
because it was going through almost like quite a green area,
yes.
wasn't it? But the people say through the park. It doesn't go through the park.
Yeah.
It goes around the outside of the park.
Yeah.
But still within the park.
Still technically within the park.
Yeah.
And if you think to that period in the early to mid 1990s, there was a huge campaign against road building. Across the UK.
Well, it started with like to Twyford Down, and
Yeah.
you had Newbury Bypass, and in London they were moaning.
And the people who were against the M77 were influenced heavily by protests elsewhere, and ultimately helped and assisted by those people. It led to the creation of a group called Pollock Free State.
Okay.
People who were bitterly opposed to the construction of the M77, and they decided to build a camp on the line of the motorway in an attempt to delay it. And people were climbing into trees and tying themselves to trees and the like. Direct action, basically.
It was direct action, very much in the theme, as you say, of the early 1990s, mid 1990s kind of direct action. I mean, and it was quite severe in some cases. I mean, we've heard stories that the protesters were in some cases there was a bit of arson that was going on site.
Yep.
They even broke into Strathclyde's offices.
Yep.
The design offices there. All kinds of things. People kind of sitting under machinery and so on, trying to hamper the contractors. Very much at the early stages of trying to get it done.
Yeah.
So what did they do about these protesters?
Well, ultimately, I believe private security were brought in by the contractor to clear the site once the compulsory purchase orders and the like were confirmed. The ownership of the land passed to the Scottish Office, and the contractor were ultimately responsible for that. And the protesters were cleared from the site, and construction was able to proceed more or less without incident.
Yeah. There was something else that was going on politically at the time, and I believe it was a new Public Order Act that had come in. I do remember reading about this, that people were also unhappy with that because this legislation was being used to move people along.
I couldn't confirm that one way or the other. I must admit that's not something that I've read up on, but you could well be right. Again, if anyone listening has any detail on that, let us know. It'd be nice to fill that gap.
It's very much within people's memory, this of the M77 being built and all the protesters and stuff like that.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Now, you said as well, very much buoyed by movements elsewhere. Not necessarily a huge amount of locals maybe getting involved in this, but you're saying there's quite a lot of people from maybe other parts of the United Kingdom, people from down south who were maybe influencing this.
Yes, I think some of the influence was definitely external. However, there was a significant proportion of people from local areas like Pollock and
Moss Park.
Yeah, Carnwadrick, places like that, areas adjacent to the motorway, where there had not been a road before, we're suddenly going to have a motorway, trundling past their house, and the noise and whatnot that would come with that.
Yeah.
Whether the motorway was right or wrong is a debate that others can can have between themselves.
No, let's have it here, Stuart. No. Let's have it right now. No, but
it's one of those situations, and you're never going to convince someone that their argument is wrong or right or whatever. You just have to try and balance the advantages and the disadvantages, and unfortunately Strathclyde Regional Council were left in that very difficult position where they had people in the south of Glasgow complaining about their kids getting run over on the A77 and the congestion there.
And the poor air pollution, because you had HGVs going up the A77. Yeah. And
on the other side of the coin, you had people who were very concerned about the effect that a brand new road was going to have on what was a historic park, and a location
which is a very valid point.
Yeah.
But we look at these things, and there is so much more air pollution that you get from putting this type of strategic traffic on city centre streets. Yeah. Stuck at lights, stuck in queues. Well, actually, with a little sacrifice of the buck, you could put them on a motorway to have almost, this free flow.
Yeah.
Now, anyone listening who uses a 77 goes, well, free flow, what you're talking about? I get stuck on this every single day.
Yeah.
And that's we can have a different discussion about our opinions on the road as it is, but it is tremendously overloaded.
I would be surprised if anyone now, looking back, would disagree that the road didn't bring some benefit with it, because the A77 in particular was traffic calmed after the M77 opened. There was new parking laybys and cycleways and things have been brought in, particularly in the East Renfrewshire section to the south, where it was already a kind of dual carriageway road. They were able to narrow that down to one lane. There were other things that were brought in on the A77 corridor through Pollock Shaws, past the Shawlands Arcade, these sorts of locations where things have been done. And although these roads are busy today, they still aren't as busy as they were pre-1996. So, from a traffic point of view, from a user point of view, from an accident point of view, things are much better.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you were to ask someone who lived adjacent to the motorway around about Nits Hill,
where the M77 wasn't there and suddenly it's there.
And now they have 60,000, 70,000 vehicles a day going past, and there's associated noise and pollution and stuff that comes with that. They might well feel that actually things are worse for them now. It's one of these projects that still divides opinion, I think. But I think there has been a clear benefit from its construction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And access to facilities such as Silverburn as well. You can see that these things came along and provided a kind of an access from people from Ayrshire to get there, and people from the city centre as well.
The only problem with these developments that have come since, and I'm thinking of the vast sprawl of Newton Mearns and Cow Glen and Pollock and all these areas like Silverburn and some of the other developments that have sprung up, these are commuter generators, these things. Or in the case of Silverburn, they generate car trips because they're designed for people who drive to visit shopping centres with free parking and things like that.
Yeah.
And what that has done, in a way, is overloaded the M77 at times.
Made it too convenient.
Too convenient, yeah. And it may surprise some people that the last time I looked at some of the traffic flow figures, that the M77 between junction 1 and 2 was busier than parts of the M74 between junctions 1 and 2A.
Yeah.
So,
Do you know what does it as well? I mean, if you have a place where the public transport is poor, and I know in the south side you got like the Cathcart Circle and things like that, but particularly I found when I worked and I wasn't driving in the Silverburn area in that shopping centre, what a nightmare to get there in public transport. Unless you drive, you're stuffed.
Yeah.
And I know that the bus station, I'm hoping, is a lot better than what it was, but it doesn't help with these things.
Another benefit that kind of came from it was the growth of interurban coach travel, because it allowed people, commuting in from Ayrshire, from North Ayrshire in particular, to consider using the bus to get to work in Glasgow.
Because the motorway was there, they could just go, right, no stops, just go from Prestwick all the way to...
Yeah, exactly. Now, that was enhanced further by the extension south, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but, it kind of introduced additional options or, modes that made them a bit more reliable, in terms of using them to get to work.
Well, on this section, this Air Road route section, so we're talking from Dumbreck all the way out towards shy of Junction 5, so where it goes up the hill.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most beautiful motorways we have in terms of how well it's landscaped.
Yeah.
and it's maintained.
It's,
I know that this was a kind of a prerequisite of its construction. Is that when you're making this, it needs to look good.
Yeah.
And it's also there's large earth bunds and embankments. Yeah. It's quite well hidden.
It's very sympathetic to its surroundings.
Yeah.
Particularly around the park, and even the sections south of the park are still treated very well in terms of the landscaping and the fact, as you say, they're in cuttings and there are earth bunds and things to try and reduce noise and the visual impact of it. There's many places you can stand, just a few metres away from the motorway. You wouldn't know it was there visually. You just don't see it. And I believe in the statistics there, I was looking at it earlier, I think actually they planted double the number of trees that were actually removed. To allow for the construction.
I can attest for that because through the joy of my work I've spent on some of these embankments on the 77 and the level of cover with the trees that are now quite old.
Oh yeah,
now,
well, 25 years on,
it's massive. It's almost like a woodland. Between them, the verge areas and the boundaries are very, very large.
Yeah, yeah. So there were some benefits from that side of things, from an ecological point of view.
So,
whereas the original construction obviously was quite painful for many because of the effect that it had.
One thing, just before we move on to the next section, is while direct action we were talking was very much a thing of the 1990s, it's now kind of back.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if anyone has looked at the news in terms of High Speed 2, but the same elite disruptors, let's call them that, have moved in on that site as well, tunnelling underneath and doing all kinds of things to try and hinder the contractors and, hit the taxpayer with higher costs for all these things. But there you go. But, it does. Somebody has to pay for the removal and make sure it's safe to do so. So it's kind of happening again, but this time it's over a railway.
Yeah, I know, which is rather unusual in itself.
I thought railways were green.
Yeah, there are some concerns about the carbon footprint of High Speed 2, I think, and there are some who believe that it will never actually be carbon neutral.
Depends how you generate the electricity for it. Depends how much concrete you do.
Yeah.
I suppose if they weren't tunnelling halfway under the Chilterns to put all these tunnels in, then maybe it would cost a lot less. But you never know.
That's it. That's
We'll save it for the High Speed 2 podcast, right?
Yeah, I
but
think
what my overall point is, direct action, it went away for a while, but it could come back with future road building.
Yeah, people get upset about transport projects. They always have done.
It's only one. It's the only. I think one, apart from maybe the A68, one of their bypasses. It was one of the only examples in Scotland where we actually had direct action protests going on. Everywhere else, it was protests through a more. Legislative.
Which is what the M74 completion had ultimately. There was no direct action there, but there was a lot of protest leading up to the start of construction.
Exactly.
Yeah, which kind of fizzled away. Yeah, okay. So
the next section. So it sat like this from the end of 1996 until basically 2005. So what happened when you were dumped off after Newton Mearns? You would remember this.
Yeah. So you would come up. So if you're heading south, you would come up the hill. You're on this lovely straight section of motorway. Oh, and by the way, the gradient of the section between junction 3 and 4 is one of the steepest on any motorway in the UK. And that's where the climbing lane is. Yeah.
Probably rivaled by the M90 at some sections, but I know.
Yeah, so they stuck a climbing lane in there, obviously, and I think it's pretty good that they did that.
It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, because it would have been really slow moving through there if they hadn't. And it is the only section that's actually 3 lanes when south
3 lanes in one direction,
south of junction 1. Which compared with the Ayr motorway, which we're not talking about here, which was a far, far higher specified road in terms of number of lanes and stuff. You should go back and listen to that podcast and get all the detail on what might have been.
Yes, that'll really cheer you up when you're stuck in traffic. Yeah.
Okay, so south of Newton Mearns, you would come along the motorway and then all of a sudden you were chucked onto this single carriageway road, which was 4 lanes wide with a double white line up the middle.
Yeah. So dual carriageway, but without the central reservation.
Yeah. Now, we're not really here to talk about the A77 because we've discussed that before. But basically, the road from here to the Kilmarnock bypass was a death trap.
Yeah.
Its safety record was one of the worst of any road in the UK and definitely in Scotland. And there had been calls for its upgrade since at least the 1970s. And I think the initial intention was that the Kilmarnock Expressway would be extended northwards. And it would just be an all-purpose dual carriageway that would link in with the extended motorway. And if you look at the highway plan or the Greater Glasgow Transportation Study, they all kind of show that the motorway was always going to end just south of Newton Mearns and it would continue as just a normal dual carriageway from there. Okay. Now, a whole raft of reasons, Strathclyde region not considering it a priority, arguing with the Scottish Office that it should be them who was funding it and taking it forward. Nothing really happened through the 70s or the 80s. However, as we got into the 90s, and they had finally accepted that they were going to extend the motorway to Newton Mearns, they started to look into extending the road further, removing that final section of single carriageway road. And in the 90s, the Scottish Office commissioned a number of people to do studies to see how that should come about.
So this is out with Strathclyde
Yes,
now?
yeah, because the M77 was a trunk road and it was out with the Glasgow city boundary, they led on this. Strathclyde had input into it, clearly, but they weren't responsible for its delivery. And eventually what was decided was that rather than just build a dual carriageway, an online upgrade of the existing road, you could really lock in the benefits and improve connectivity and journey time reliability and whatnot by building a new section of road, in this case a motorway. Let's extend the motorway south and retain the A77 as a parallel distributor road. So there you're removing it, the need to have a separate road for.
You got the corridor there, the roads are there.
And it was stated as well that there was a lot of agricultural traffic and cyclists and people like that.
It's rural. I mean, it goes over the Fenwick Moor.
Oh, yeah. So rather than have a dual carriageway that would then encourage tractors and farm vehicles and all these things onto it, which could then create safety problems, basically the justification was there to build an all-new road that was reserved for motorway traffic only, and that would leave the side roads to be converted to cycleways, and farm vehicles could use it, with it.
So get the blue pen out. Jolly good.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And by the mid-1990s, 1995, they were sitting more or less with a finished design ready to go.
Okay.
And at the same time, there had been another project that had been on the books for many, many years, and I think we mentioned this back in December, was the Eaglesham Bypass. So this was a road to bypass Eaglesham and remove that Fenwick Moor road. Because that was a very busy road at this time from East Kilbride across to Kilmarnock, but it was very poor in the winter. It did not have a lot of resilience against snow and poor weather conditions, high winds, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the village of Eaglesham, which is a conservation area and has been for a long, long time, the people there fought hard for a bypass.
Yeah, because they were sick of all this traffic coming through.
Exactly. And what developed alongside that became what we now know as the Glasgow Southern Orbital route.
A76.
Yeah. Now that was taken forward. Strathclyde region did some initial development on that, and then it was eventually taken forward by East Renfrewshire Council and South Lanarkshire Council as the successor authorities to Strathclyde. So what we eventually sat with was in the late 90s, we had a proposal for an M77 extension and a proposal for a Glasgow Southern Orbital route from Newton Mearns across to East Kilbride.
Great.
Okay?
So let's get it built.
Yeah, let's get it built. But unfortunately, political changes come along. So the change of government in 1997 led to a roads review. The introduction of devolution in 1999 then changed the whole way that roads were administered and the construction of them. And it was only in November of 1999 that the new Scottish Executive confirmed that they would proceed with the construction of that road, and that it would be taken forward as a design, build, finance and operate type scheme, which basically means it was PFI.
Yes.
It was a PFI, privately financed scheme.
Yeah. So private, it's paid for privately, and then you pay it back over years with a company maintaining it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a mortgage for a road.
Yeah. So through 2000 and 2001, East Renfrewshire Council, as the lead authority on this scheme, prepared all the documentation, got everything approved and signed off, and then went to tender. And in 2003, the construction contract was awarded to Connect, which was a joint venture of Balfour Beatty and Atkins. So the big designer, Atkins and Balfour Beatty, who of course we all know.
Big
and
contractor.
not only were they going to construct the two roads, the GSO and the M77, they were also going to maintain them for a period of 30 years as well.
So that's everything, your winter maintenance, you're filling in your potholes, you're picking up the litter.
Yeah. And the construction of that began in late 2003. And by April 2005, 27th of April 2005, almost 16 years ago.
Well remembered.
Yep. They were able to open these two new roads, and the basically transportation between Kilmarnock and Glasgow changed overnight.
It was much safer for one. As for journey time, I mean that road was kind of a 60-mile-an-hour limit, and that's 70.
I had the misfortune of using the old E77 on a few occasions in wet weather, in the dark. It was horrible.
I remember there being fog issues on it. Now, I don't think I was driving when it was there, because I didn't get my license until 2005, 2006 or something like that. But I remember being driven on it. So
It was a horrible piece of road.
Yeah, I thought it was unusual, to say the least.
And it had bends, and it had accesses in and off it, and into farms and
it wasn't all 2 lanes in each direction. It wasn't this S4.
No.
Some of it was S3.
Yeah.
So there was a suicide lane down the middle.
Yeah.
You know, which had equal priorities and things. And there was, as you say, junctions.
By the time they decided to extend the motorway, the shared middle lane had long been taken away.
Yeah, they not?
But you had like 2 lanes in one direction and one in the other.
2+1, which is modern. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But by the time we would have been using it, that certainly was gone. And if there's anybody listening can remember when that shared middle lane was, the priorities were closed off, or, given to one direction over the other, let us know. But yeah, you're right. Originally, there were sections with the suicide lane in the middle, which is just a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And so many people died on that road unnecessarily, you could say. And but we got the motorway, and I remember using the motorway for the first time when it opened, and it was night and day with what was there before. Nice long straight bit of road, proper junctions. You had variable message signage, warnings, all the rest of it. It was night and day.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And you know what the nice thing is? It ties in very nicely at Meiklewood, which is the top end of the Kilmarnock bypass. Yeah. And then you actually go from, grade separated motorway to a grade separated dual carriageway. And, in fairness, of a whole route thing for the 77 until you get down towards Ayr, it's lovely.
Because the Kilmarnock bypass was built to very high standards.
It was, so it all tied in. And like I said, the first time you actually hit a roundabout isn't way down till whatever it is.
Moncton. Yeah, Moncton.
Is it Moncton?
Yeah.
That's what it's called, yeah. So what do you think of the route in terms of how it looks, about how it's landscaped and how it looks? Because I think it's quite scenic up there.
It is very scenic. Even the section over the moor, where there aren't a lot of trees and things like that, it's still a fairly scenic bit of road to drive.
I always think it's like driving on Mars up there. That was fun. The only thing is with it, and we need Nick here for this, it's a heck of a racetrack, that road.
Right, okay. I couldn't comment on that.
Well, any time I've been up there, I do see people driving really quickly along that road. They're either trying to get to Ayrshire quickly or get out of Ayrshire very quickly. I don't know what they're doing, but it's a fast road, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But no, as you say, night and day for anyone who was using that.
Yeah, it still continues to perform very well.
Very well to this day.
Some traffic issues on the northern sections, as we say, as you approach the city centre, usually in the morning peak, although obviously in the last year or two that hasn't been an issue, with traffic flows being much lighter.
That's it. So, if we're going to talk about overall the route performance and the traffic on it just now, I have often seen the M77 as this weak link, and it suffered when the M74 was plugged in.
Yeah.
Particularly, and another lane was added southbound, wasn't it? An auxiliary lane between Plantation and Debreg. So, the levels of traffic that go through there now are well in excess of what a dual 2-lane motorway can take.
Yes, and that comes back to why in the original Ayr motorway proposals they knew the weaving that would be occurring in there, which is why they probably had dual 4 lanes for sections of it.
If I'm looking at it just from a pure traffic and engineering point of view, looking at it now, really these sections between 1 or 0, if you call it Plantation, all the way down to Darnley should probably be 3 or 4 lane.
I would agree with you in that from a traffic point of view.
From very much a traffic point of view. Now, if we can look at how that fits in, you might find that here's a challenge, because it would suddenly lose some of its aesthetic. Yeah. So what do we do here? Do we take away the hard shoulders, turn them into running lanes? Do we look at a bus type system, a bus lane system, which was mooted but then got killed? So they have looked at it before, but I find it an incredibly congested route at peak times.
Yeah, I think going forward, let's be honest, everything's up in the air at the moment. No one knows what the recovery from COVID-19 is going to look like.
Well, I've seen the recovery over the last 3 weeks from a traffic perspective, and it's getting very busy again.
Busy, but not congested.
I've seen some congestion, even on the rural there, mate, in some areas. I can't comment on the 77 particularly.
But it'll be interesting to see how, and bear in mind we've just come through the Easter holidays as well.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to watch over the next few months, next year or so, to see how things come back.
Just a quick thing. Do you know what, when I look and watch heavy traffic, do you know what the majority of the vehicles are?
Was it white vans?
It's vans. Yeah. There's so many vans. Yeah. There's nothing against it, because these are folk running their businesses and trying to get about. They need to use the roads.
Yeah, LGV traffic, I think, is through the roof.
And that's maybe something that they just never envisaged in some cases back in the day.
People aren't going to go to the shops, themselves, and they're all
They
closing
need
down.
it delivered.
It has to get to them somehow, and ultimately that's coming by vans, and you know that's a trade-off. You know, is that a discussion people are having? You know, the high street's dying off because people aren't driving to go to the high street, and people go, "That's wonderful. You shouldn't use your car to go shopping anyway." But that's fine. But now we've got an Amazon van running up and down
Everywhere.
instead.
And if anyone says, "Well, why don't you just use Deliveroo?" and then you see these crazy Deliveroo cyclists who just run over pedestrians, you know, kind of unabashed aggression. So no, it's very difficult. But anyway, we'll probably steer ourselves back to 77.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we really want to talk about with this road?
You know, to be honest, there isn't actually a great deal else to say about it because although it took a while to get built, once it got built, it was fairly, it's just another road.
And
it doesn't have a lot of very interesting features.
No, not from our Glasgow
it's
Motorway
like Steps
archive point of
Bypass
view.
has got the big fancy railway bridge, or the Monkland Motorway's got the Proven Gas Towers, or the Renfrew Motorway's got White Cat Viaduct at the Renfrew Bypass, or the M77 doesn't really have any big high-profile features that you go, oh, that's wonderful.
That's it. I'm looking around the room, right, and obviously you've adorned your entire house with pictures of the motorway. The
entire house,
right?
Yeah.
And you look everywhere, and you're right. Renfrew Motorway, Woodside Viaduct, the Inner Ring Road, all these kind of things that are quite exciting from the history point of view.
Yeah.
I don't see one picture on your stairs of the M77 or, I don't, to be honest with you.
It's a functional road.
Yeah.
It's a functional road, but it doesn't have much else going for it, I would say.
But we need some M77 love, so please come back and say something if you're listening to this and think, actually, this bit's really cool, this bit's really exciting. I love them. Do you know what I love? When you're coming down that big hill.
Yeah, and you see Glasgow.
That is a cracking view.
I agree.
Do you know what's going to happen now? We've spoken about 77. We're going to get some questions about what about those 60-mile-an-hour speed limits? I think we've covered this many times of why that speed limit is
no
there.
more on the speed limits. I was going to say was this will lead into our refresh of the M77 page. Anybody who follows the website will know that we've recently revisited the M8 and the M74 pages, and we've made detailed route histories available for download. And M77 route history will be available shortly, as will a revised page with some new images never seen before, and that includes images from the southern section. And we've already done a GoPro drive of the M77 with the camera mounted to the roof of a vehicle.
All right.
So that's all coming as well with some information overlaid, so watch out for that. But I think on that note, I think it's quiz time.
I think it is quiz time. I'm sitting here poised with the questions, Stuart. So first of all, just a lead in from these. So these came from Dan Stephen, who seems to be an avid listener. So of these things, he says he loves the podcast, and that's great because we love you too, Dan. So he says he's not from Glasgow, but he goes through some of the things, but he has some great questions. Okay?
It's good that people listen who are not from Glasgow.
I know.
I think that's great.
We've checked some of the figures, and people from all around the world listen to it. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only available in English, so we'll have to learn some other languages.
Yeah, we'll
have
a global reach. You'll have to go and do some courses and come back. Yeah.
Okay, right. The first question he has got looks like about 6 here. First question for you, Stuart. What's wrong with the M90?
What's wrong with the M90? Well, what's right with the M90?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What is wrong with it? Because you do bash it.
There's a perception that I'm an M90 hater amongst many of the listeners. I may have not been very kind about the M90 in some of our earlier podcasts.
Right.
I would perhaps choose my words a bit more carefully now.
Now that you've been educated about it.
Of course. Yes. My problem with the M90. Okay, I think the M90 is a fantastic road that is a very quick link between Edinburgh and Perth. However, the fact that a long section of it doesn't have hard shoulders has always annoyed me.
Right, substandard in ways, yep.
I don't believe it deserves to be a blue line on a map.
Okay.
And I am also ever so slightly peeved by its southern approach to Queensferry Crossing.
Yes.
From a traffic point of view, I don't think it works as well as perhaps it could.
Yes. I don't know how much we want to go into that, but I see what you mean, to be honest with you.
But the M90 also has some very nice features, like Craig End. I appreciate
and
fake
those
Baillieston. Yeah, fake Baillieston up at Craig End on the M90. Junction 10 has some structures that look like they were actually meant for Baillieston. That's deliberate because it was Babty who designed them as
That's
well, and
right.
they also designed Baillieston.
And what about those bends and the hill?
Yeah, and there's a steep gradient up there as well.
Very steep. Yeah. We've obviously we have a podcast on the M90.
Yeah.
So anyone who's listening wants to know more about this terrific road, you can go back and
you
find
did
out.
a lot of research on that road. Yeah.
I think again it was one of these things, and maybe it was in the news a lot, wasn't it? And you just heard a lot about it, and it wasn't Glasgow, so you didn't.
Yeah,
you didn't like
my
it.
appreciation for that road has come on a bit based on some of the research we've done, and we came across basically construction photos for all of it as part of our work with Historic Environment Scotland, and then that changed my perspective a wee bit as well.
Good.
Yeah. So
That's fine. Have you ever had a bad M90 experience?
No, never.
Okay, that wasn't a Dan question. That was just for me. But no, okay. So your hate was unjustified. That's fine.
Might even be willing to admit that actually.
Question 2. Okay, he says, I see a lot around on Sabre. Now, for anyone listening who wonders what Sabre is, that is a forum for road enthusiasts.
Yes.
Okay, so he says, I see a lot around on Sabre, and also a few people who have asked before about the M8 between Glasgow and Edinburgh being upgraded to dual 3-lane motorway. I used to think this was a great idea, but a few questions I have related to this are. Okay, so his first one is, do you think it is worth the expense to upgrade the entire route, considering lane hogging being such a problem on such roads? It could effectively just operate as a 2-lane motorway anyway.
Okay. Well, I'll answer that one before you give me the next one.
Yes.
I would say it's not really for me to decide whether it's suitable or appropriate to upgrade that to 3 lanes in each direction. But what I would say from a traffic point of view, a traffic engineering point of view, the addition of a 3rd lane would remove the issue of overtaking heavy goods vehicles that can delay other vehicles.
Yes.
So, heavies are then restricted to lane 1 and 2. And then you've got the 3rd lane, which would then allow faster moving vehicles to pass.
Yes.
Like you have in the M74, say, south of Junction 12. So you've got a lot of heavy goods traffic.
It makes a less frustrating and more consistent driving experience.
Yes. Yeah. But whether that justifies the expense on its own, I don't know. Because again, it would all depend on COVID recovery and what traffic looks like in a year's time. Okay. Are as many people going to be driving to Edinburgh every morning to get to work who aren't key workers?
Perhaps.
Maybe office workers won't be on the road every morning now.
Because there'll be 3 out of 5 days a week. They'll be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so these things need to be considered, I think, in the longer term.
Can I weigh in a little bit on this one?
Of course you can.
If using that rationale of, it removes the problem of HGVs, elephant racing, is what it's called, why bother making a 3rd lane anyway? And why not just go and say, actually, there's an HGV overtaking ban.
Yeah.
They'd done that on the A14 and it made a huge difference. Yeah, they ended up upgrading bits of it to 3-lane, but it was something to deal with that problem.
Could be an interim measure that could be trialled to see, determine if it was effective.
People have made this argument before about adding lanes to existing motorways. It's just another lane that people would sit in, to be honest with you. But, people should know how to drive. At least you keep left unless you overtake.
Yeah.
I sound like Nick now, but that's the way it is. So the other part of his question is, are there any sections of the Glasgow system which suffer as a result of people always sitting in the middle?
I think that would be very difficult to determine. If anything, there are parts of the Glasgow system that are designed to keep people in the middle. So if you think of the section from Provan, M80, all the way through to Plantation, really the only way you can get through all that, if you're continuing ahead, is to stay in the middle.
It's to stay in 3, 4 and 5.
It's the people who are out on the outsides that are ultimately causing the problem by cutting in and creating weaving and conflicts that are actually causing the problem there. Would middle lane hogging be a problem in its own? Well, again, Nick would be the best person to comment on this because there's obviously clear reasons why you don't want middle lane hogging. But from a traffic point of view, from a functionality point of view, I think there's sufficient capacity and space on the M8 through Glasgow that actually, whether one person sitting in the middle or a couple of people are, I don't think it's going to affect its efficiency too much.
No, I think people make a lot of hoo-ha about this middle lane hogging, but actually it is more of a problem on rural long-distance routes where you have junctions that are far apart. In an urban motorway setting where you have the junctions very close together,
Yeah.
a lot of people know, oh, well, hold on, if I'm in lane 1 here, it's going to drop in less than a mile.
Yeah.
So I may as well just stay in lane 2. Now, if you think the most dangerous thing you do in a motorway is actually changing lane,
Yeah.
if you're reducing the amount of times you have to change lane, then fair enough. I know that plays against sometimes keep left and less overtaking, but use your judgment.
Yeah.
Where I see it particularly bad, this is where I see it, is on the section between Hillington and Govan at Helling Street.
Yeah.
People seem to love to sit in the outside lane and stuff like, especially late at night. It's just because the roads go, so you have to go all the way around.
One of the things that's interesting about the M8, if you're in the westbound M8 and you have just passed junction 12, right? If you want to go straight through, you're through traffic and you're heading for Hillington or the M77 or whatever, you would need to stay in what is lane 3 at that time. Now, after junction 12, of course, it's 4 lanes and one drops off. So if you were in lane 3, that's the only lane that continues all the way through without interruption.
Yeah,
Because-
all of them are dropping here or coming on here, or
Because
you're
then
gaining.
you've got gains, and then you've got drops, and then another drop,
That's
and then
interesting.
another drop, and then what was lane 3 then actually becomes lane 1 through Charing Cross, and then you've got a gain at Anderson that drops off, and then it then becomes lane 3 on Kingston, and then lane 4 on Kingston, and then so, yeah. It's
have
complicated.
So I think the middle lane hoggers are not people who maybe are just not aware, but they're probably people who are overly aware.
Yes.
I'm going to stay in the same because I may as well.
I would imagine.
I'm not
so.
justifying it, but I'm maybe giving a background to the psychology behind it. That's suffer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just get around them.
Now, I know Dan gave us quite a few questions, and I think
We'll
we've got time for one more, I think. Yeah. I think
Well,
we've got one more.
okay. So we've got C here, which 2C. Do you feel there are any sections of the Glasgow motorway system which could benefit from reducing the number of lanes? I would never be in support of such a decision to do so, but we always hear the opposite being asked about increased capacity, so it could be interesting to discuss the opposite.
Okay.
So, taking away lanes, what is there a benefit from doing that?
There can be. Because if you have an area where there's a lot of weaving, so thinking of the Kingston Bridge northbound, where it used to be 5 unrestricted lanes side by side, and they decided to change it to 2 separate carriageways, one with 2 lanes and one with 3 lanes. They removed a whole load of weaving and it
actually helped.
And it significantly improved conditions in there for traffic and for accident rates. And likewise, where you have other areas where people cut in at the last minute, where you've got a lane drop or whatever, if you were removing that and just having through traffic, that would probably improve conditions as well, I would think. Yeah.
Well, I know one particular section, M8, and that is westbound junction 27. There's a very nasty on-slip that comes on just onto the White Cart Viaduct. I've often thought, is it a good idea just after the off-slip to Paisley at Arkleston, hatch off lane 1 and have it so it hatches off lane 1, and then you have it just as a gain coming on at the White Cart Viaduct from B&Q. And that removes this thing where you either have to go really fast or you have to go very slow. That's the trick with that slip road. So that answers that.
Okay.
Now you said he does have another couple of questions we might have time for. Can I ask just one more that he's asked?
Yeah, you go ahead then.
Do you have any plans to do any special podcasts on motorway routes or systems outside of Scotland? Do we?
Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've spoken about other urban motorways, haven't we?
But a few times.
I think he's maybe talking about, are you ever going to do an M6 one? Are you ever going to do an M62 one?
Yeah.
An M25?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule any of that out, but...
We are the Glasgow Motorway Archive,
yeah,
so...
and we'll probably become Scotland's road archive.
Your empire building here.
Yeah, in the near future. I would do English motorways from an interest point of view to do something different, but I would prefer to drive them first to refresh my memory about them.
And we're not experts on them, no. There's probably going to be someone down south that knows a heck of a lot more.
We wouldn't be able to give you the same level of detail that we can give you on the Glasgow motorways or the Scottish motorways.
Yeah. What we'd have to do, in other words, is maybe bus Chris in, or one of the other guys on Sabre to talk about if we wanted to have an M69 special or something.
Road Geek Day Out.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So, I would never rule it out, but...
No, we never rule anything out.
We never
would. But yeah, we do have some other priorities first.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe for the future, maybe we could do an A55 podcast or an M11 podcast,
an M4
podcast,
an M2 podcast.
There's sections of the M4 that have urban characteristics that came around the same time as Glasgow. It could be interesting to do a comparison.
You've got me thinking now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Anyway, Dan, I think you had some more questions, but we'll certainly cover those next month. And if anybody else has questions, of course, please feel free to submit them either via social media or via email, admin@glasgows-motorways.org.uk. And I think that's all we have time for this episode, John. It's been great to see you again.
It's great to see you, Stuart.
Hopefully everybody has enjoyed M77. We have a few more interesting topics coming up. I think everyone will be quite happy to hear we're doing an A1 podcast very shortly.
Back to the east.
Yeah, back to the east. So we've got that coming up, and we have some other plans as well, which we'll reveal in due course. Keep an eye on the website, constantly changing and updating and expanding as we go. In terms of these podcasts, all episodes are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and anywhere else where you find your podcasts. Remember, if you can leave a rating, do so. It gets a wee bit, notice for us if we get some good reviews. Thanks to everyone who's done that so far.
Yep, and while you're at it, check out the social media. We're still posting things on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. So go on there and see all the new things. So many great new things, by the way. There's so many new slides and stuff like that. So don't miss out. Yep. Go follow us.
I've scanned something like 3,000 slides already this year, none of which have been shared yet. So, there's plenty to come.
A lot of touching up that needs done.
Yeah, and I was also going to say that on YouTube, we have the YouTube channel. There's more material showing up on there as well. So you might want to go on there and have a look.
Great.
But on that note, thank you again for listening, and we will speak to you very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.